There are many ways to discipline people for their mistakes. The punishment for people now who have done crimes is not as bad as it was back in the century. These punishments for criminals today is nothing in comparison to how it was in the history. These videos will exhibit 10 sadistic and brutal weapons and methods of torturing criminals back in medieval and ancient times. 1. The heretic's fork. To those who speak out against the Catholic Church, this first torture weapon will terrify you. During the Middle Ages, people get punished with this device for speaking out against the Catholic Church. With two spiked ends, the heretic's fork is a device to kill people slowly while experiencing severe pain. In this method, the fork is placed in between the person's neck, and not until the wearer had spoken the words "I recant," the device will stay in between their necks until they get exhausted and kill themselves, stabbing their chin and/or chest. 2. Rat torture. This method of torture was somewhat extremely popular in both ancient China and medieval Germany. It requires rats and a pot. How it works is that by placing a pot of starving and hungry rats against the victim's belly, the punisher will then make the pot hot. Since there is no other way to escape from the heat, the distressed rats will then have no choice but to dig and gnaw into the victim's belly. 3. Keel hauling. This next punishment is crafted by the pirates and navy. Keel hauling was a popular form to punish people. During the 18th century, victims are placed and tied into the ship to be tossed overboard and be dragged. Not only for hungry sharks lurking underwater, but also to rip the skin from the victim, caused by the jagged barnacles on the hull of the boat. 4. The brazen bull. During the 6th century BC, a guy named Perillus of Athens, a brass worker, crafted probably the most brutal and sadistic torture device, and it is the brazen bull. In this method, the victim is put inside the hollowed brass bull with the fire lit underneath it, and since tubes have been installed inside the statue, it makes it even worse, for it loudens the criminal's scream, sounding like a raging bull. The irony of this device is that he was the first victim of his own artwork. 5. Iron Maiden. This is almost a duplicate of an Egyptian mummy coffin-like device. The whole point of this torture method is to kill the victim instantly once the coffin is closed. With its extremely pointy spikes, the victim is placed inside the chamber, and by closing the door behind them, it will immediately stab and destroy their whole body. 6. Breast ripper. This instrument comes from the medieval Germany. The purpose of this torturing device is to rip the victim's breast away from their body. It is done usually by heating or freezing the ripper first and clamping it onto the victim's breast to be pulled away. This torture method is usually done with women, but if necessary, gender is not an excuse. 7. Lingqi. Also known as the death by 1,000 cuts. During the 14th century Ming dynasty, Lingqi's popularity rose. This is used usually on criminals, giving them death sentences. This execution method is very brutal and barbaric. In this form of elimination, the person is tied to a wooden frame in front of the public, then the knife is used to remove portions of the flesh of the body. Executioners usually start with breasts, then thighs, and last is to get the limbs amputated. 8. Scaphism. This ancient Persian method of execution is one of the nastiest ways to torture a person. By putting two boats of equal size nailed on top of each other, the victim is then inserted inside the two boats with the head, hands, and feet sticking out with honey covering them. The main point of the method is to be consumed by insects or die with dehydration and/or exposure caused by the heat. 9. The boots. According to historical accounts, this is the most severe and cruel punishment in the world. With this method, the victim dies with an excruciating amount of pain. This device is made with iron or wooden boots which are placed upon the victim's legs. A solid wedge would then be put between the legs and the boot's walls, and a blow from a sledgehammer would drive the wedge deeper into the boot. 10. The rack. This last medieval Europe form of execution is very brutal. Killing the victim slowly and experiencing severe and excruciating pain, this is probably one of the most monstrous methods to torture people. In this form of execution, the person or the victim would have their ankles and wrists tied to a device. Two executioners will then crank the rack's gear, making the machine pulling on the victim's limbs in the opposite directions until they dismembered. Forms of punishment have definitely changed over time. These types of punishment are still done until this day by few countries, but some have also been banned, for it is considered as a very inhumane form of punishing criminals in comparison with the ones that are given for criminals today. Having to know all these forms of torturing people or criminals back then, It truly shows that consequences in our history are far worse and brutal. For more videos like this, hit the subscribe button and turn the notification on.